Welcome to ET Startup Awards. Y'all are definitely familiar with what these awards are about. And I think even more importantly, the amount of peer attention that speaking at the ET Startup Awards delivers. So I thought we should really, sort of begin by sort of making the point what Satyan also spoke about, right? This has been a great decade of disruption. And we've seen Indian startups really come of age, and never more so than with the flurry of IPOs that we are seeing. And that is like proving to be the biggest validation that startup innovation has seeped into the societal fabric of India. The fact that he mentioned that our neighbors could be investing in your companies, that's really like a moment in time for India. I think it's really a point that we should all celebrate. It's really great. And then, of course, we have the technological changes that are also ahead of us. So that makes, I think, a great crackling conversation with all of you, I think, really at the edge of all of the change. So to start with, I thought we could start with Abhiraj. And if you could tell us what it's been like building this absolutely spectacular company that you've come up with during a time of a lot of disruption, right? Including what we've been through in the last 4 or 5 years, really.
Thank you for having me. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think I have to keep reminding myself that it's been a real privilege to be able to build the company that I'm building and to basically build it in the times that we live in, where there is so much opportunity to create large-scale impact in India. I think when I started in November 2014, I certainly didn't think we would get this far. It was all about survival and trying to make the next week happen, the next month happen, and somehow make it, to the next stage. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. You have to believe, you have to put one step ahead of the next and keep going. And, before you know it, you've traversed some distance and you realize that you've laid the foundation for what could be a very, very large and impactful company for India, for society at large. And that honestly is a privilege that is not lost on me. The opportunity to build for this market, for Indians. And I think all of us as founders have that privilege and that opportunity and that responsibility that Satyan spoke about. So it's a very exciting time that we live in. There's a lot of opportunity. There will always be, you have to keep reinventing because there will be disruption. There'll always be some new kid on the block who is aggressive and wants to disrupt you. So, keep going.
Nandita, before we come back to you, I thought, since Abhiraj just brought this up about the new kid on the block who can disrupt it, I think we have him right here. You've disrupted a huge geopolitical sector once, and you're aiming to do it again. So what gives?
Yeah, I mean, when we have started, we didn't come to say that we'll disrupt the incumbents back then. We just said that it's still not solved, and the problem is really big.
You thought Ola and Uber hadn't solved it?
I mean, when we started, problem. Definitely not.
Okay.
We started 10 years back, so we are not new kid in the town. We took 10 years to come here. Used to sit in the last row, and then now the first row has been given to me. So we have come a long mark. But I think one thing is constant, that we always kept value conscious in terms of how do we give value to the users. And that's what made sure that we became number one in terms of the number of trips that we do or number of cities that we are present. But the underlying theme is how do you pass value to the captains, and then that's the biggest thing that we have done over the course of time. We want to give freedom to the captains, and we made sure that we have given freedom and we have given earnings to them, and then the more number of captains started joining us.
We'll come back again to hear how you're going to do this all over again now in food delivery. But Nandita, I thought it's interesting really that e-commerce, for instance, has not been as disrupted by the quick commerce wave that we've seen. So it's been a different kind of scenario for you. What are your views on that?
I think if you look at how e-commerce has been over the last so many years in the country, I think first, this is the rails that were set to, build for all of the disruption that's happening around us. And I think the scale that e-commerce has achieved, it is coupled with both things together. I think what Abhiraj and Arvind spoke about, that the opportunity is really, really big. If I were to speak of fashion, it's $120 billion. Still a lot of opportunity for us to build online fashion in this ecosystem. And coupled with that, you have 400 million Gen Z consumers who are truly defining what fashion, I mean, that is the generation that always defines what fashion is going to be. So they are disrupting for us for sure.
Okay.
And I think what we don't see, at least what I would say that for a company like Myntra, is that you have to disrupt yourself by building for a consumer which is very, very new. So when we are building for the Gen Z consumer, for that 400 million consumer, we know that they are digitally native consumers. They really want content first shopping experiences. They are trend first consumers. They may or may not be brand first consumers. So how do you build for a technology immersive consumer experience for them? How do you really build a marketplace which enables new age brands? Because that's where disruption in the supply ecosystem is happening. And therefore, how do you build for that? And then how do you build for newer categories like beauty? I mean, that is going through an explosion of its own. To within your platforms that you have already built, which are of scale and size. And also, I think, how do we use technology, you know, like whether it's conversational commerce or whether it's commerce first, content first commerce. I think these are all parts of disruption that I would say a company like Myntra and incumbent e-commerce companies are doing, because the consumer is getting disrupted whether we like it or not, or whether we see it like that. Like the Gen Z consumer is disrupting all the rules of shopping, and we all have to disrupt ourselves. So I would actually say that while you know, there is so, and it's very exciting to be here, to be in this ecosystem where so much disruption is happening. So many new companies are getting built every day. But none of us will be able to build for the future if we don't disrupt ourselves, because the consumer is changing, the marketplace is changing.
No respite, basically. That's your big
That's
point.
the fun. That's the fun.
Yeah. So, Abhiraj, I think I just have to ask you this question. We'll just step back from the execution part of it to ask you about the big elephant in the room, so to speak, IPO valuations for new economy companies, and a lot of social media chatter around it. What's your take on it?
Look, I think my take on it is that eventually, in the long run, the execution, you know, will define how a company is valued, right? What I tell my team and the solace that I draw now as a publicly listed founder is that eventually there is wisdom of the crowds that is voting with their money. So there is no better form of truth seeking. And 5,
That's
6,
fair.
10 years out, whatever our valuation is really going to be what we are truly worth. Because what better way to do value discovery than actually millions of people, you know, not voting with their opinions, but actually voting with their money. Now, if you believe in that long-term value discovery thesis, you can make your peace with it and build for the long term, focus on the long term. And yes, I think that's really sort of at least how we think about it at Urban Company.
I thought I'd just come back, Arvind, to you to sort of get your thoughts on the fact that you've defined mobility as this mass kind of product, and you know, we are now talking about companies that are going public where profitability is an issue. How do you view this with regard to your company, and you know, where do you see yourself on that scale?
Yeah, I think especially someone who's solving for masses, where if you look at Rapido right now, we have like almost 60 million quarterly transacting users. So when you're solving for that kind of a mass, the biggest thing is how do you make sure that you pass the value to the users, but at the same time you go for further growth. I mean, unless we grow or start thinking about 50, 100, 200 million users, a lot of things that we are trying to do will not make sense. So, and hence our solutions is more about what it makes sense for a particular city. How do we go deeper into a particular city? For example, there are a lot of cities where a population moves on Rapido, like 50% of the population use Rapido every quarter. So when you're solving for that kind of scale, what is more important is how can you make it a lot more ecosystem play where it works in every city. It can't just say that you work in one city, but it not works in another city. So for us, for us, the profitability is more to do with the scale because we charge very minimal amount for every driver. We charge as less as 20 rupees to 25 rupees per month, per day per driver for our captain. So once you're charging so less, then the only way that you can make money is by multiplying with more number of captains, right? So, and you can multiply with more number of captains only if you go to more cities or if more users see value in the product that you are building. So that's how we think of profitability. But more than profitability, it's more about how do we penetrate further. So till now, we have been like 70% of our market come from top 100 cities, but now we are going after the next 1,000 cities because we think the transportation is broken there as well, where we can complement to existing public transport in the metropolitan cities, but in a lot of smaller cities where public transport doesn't even exist, we can be a private player providing a public infra layer.
Abhiraj, what's it to be, building volume in a price-sensitive market? Because that's an issue you'd face too in your business, right? Would you agree with what Arvind's saying in terms of going for volume?
Look, I think in our business, the customer is looking for value, and that value comes from delivering a high quality service experience at home, delivering on time and increasingly quickly, because consumers today don't want to wait. They want things fast. And then, we operate micro market by micro market. It's not even a city model. The city gets divided into hundreds of micro markets, and you really have to densify the micro market to be able to make the economics work at scale. And once that density and network effects and flywheel kicks in, I think if your gross margins and contribution margins are high enough, they cover for the fixed costs in technology and onboarding of service professionals and training them, and in building that densification and liquidity. We've seen that play out in our core business across all the major cities, and that's really the journey that we have to continue.
Nandita, in your case, what do you think it'll take to make Myntra AI ready, if it isn't already getting there? I know you spoke of disruption from Gen Z, but we also have this huge disruption sort of on.
I think AI just is making all of the disruption that we thought we had to do possible. So if I talk of discovery and how do you really personalize it for this 400 million Gen Z consumer base that we all want to build for, and they all come from different, like fashion at the scale that we operate is also about micro markets and micro consumer groups, etc. So how do you really personalize the discovery and how you power it through AI? The other example of what we do for AI and for the Gen Z consumer is probably the trend ecosystem that is being built, because as you discover trends, as you curate trends, as you help the marketplace really bring these trends to the consumer, all of that would not have been possible without the AI enhancements that you're doing. I think how do we really, over a period of time or quickly, depending on the kind of bets that we make, how do we transform our shopping experience, which is truly content-led and AI-powered, is where I think we will go. So I think right from how we enable the marketplace, how do we enable customer experience, what is the customer touch point? Because while we are not delivering services to the consumer's house, but we are delivering products. So how do we make that seamless for the customer? How do we make the core of trend discovery truly AI-powered? Because that cannot happen without AI. And then the discovery of the product for the consumer in a format which is very, very native to that consumer is where I think AI will play a part, whether it's conversational commerce or content commerce. And I'll give an example. We started something called Glamstream in Myntra, which is really the first consumer creator program in the country. We started with the insight that all Gen Z consumers want to be creators, actually. And in the last 6 months, we have 3 million people who signed up to be creators on our platform. And then how do they create content? How do we enable them is also AI enabled. How do we help them monetize that content? And how do we then help consumers discover products and adapt products? So I think none of this is going to be possible if we don't think of ourselves not as AI enabled, but actually AI first as an organization. And that's the work we have to do. But I think the good thing is that there is so much we are seeing slivers of success, and there is so much intentionality behind it, because in this large market that we speak of, there are so many unsolved problems which now AI allows us to
Allows
solve.
you to.
Yeah.
Can consumers look to getting deliveries quicker, since you've not been disrupted by quick commerce?
No, I think our theme is disrupt ourselves. So if we look at service, I think, and like Abhiraj said, and all of us who have built, businesses, consumer businesses on probably the previous service delivery expectation,
True.
we all have kind of moved forward in that direction. But also with quick commerce, we have MNOW, which is what we are trying to do, and we see traction. So I think there is traction of where quick commerce is playing in fashion also. We are seeing a lot of success in that. And we are overall moving the service table from what consumers expect on speed. So they want it faster. We have to build our networks and our supply chains and our marketplaces to deliver faster. So I think we have to keep disrupting ourselves.
So Arvind, do you want to tell us what you have in store when you're going after another duopolistic market?
Yeah, I mean, we don't see it's a duopoly or anything, or we want to disrupt is not the aim. I think we see there is a market where there is an opportunity, and we think we are better positioned to do it. And we are not saying that we are the only position to do it, but definitely we have a chance to make it. So I think with the constant theme of how can we pass the value that we have created. If you see the Rapido network, we have the users and we have the captains delivering throughout the country. So where we power existing quick commerce players as well as a logistics partner. So how can we use both and then give the value to the user? So that's what we are hoping with our new launch that's going to happen formally. We are still running a pilot in a small area in Bangalore. So
How soon can we expect that?
Yeah, I mean, similar to quick commerce, somewhere quick it should happen. So it should not take time.
We'll wait. Amiraj, I just wanted to come to you with a question that, we're talking technology, we're talking execution and so on. But essentially, you're working with a large gig economy, right? So in the age of AI, essentially, how will you support livelihoods, the expansion of that entire economy? Is that a challenge? Is that a moat that you think of that your company can build, given that you have deep roots there already?
That's a good question. I think for us, look, at some point, AI will move from the software realm fast enough into the real world and the hardware realm. And that's something that we have to constantly build towards. I think in the medium term, what will happen is that it will make our service professionals far more productive, both in terms of the software layer, which helps them do their jobs better, helps better matchmaking. Simple example, like our AC and appliance technicians now carry a AI-enabled device that gives them a real-time second opinion on what could be wrong with the appliance. So it helps them diagnose better, it gives trust to the end consumer. So I think a lot of that is what will play out in our case. And we're also constantly looking at, are there realistically practical robotic solutions and devices which can enhance productivity. And that's something that, is still far out, but, one eye on that as well.
We are marking a decade and more of the ET Startup Awards, and profitability has become like a big, sort of discussion really, even with companies now having to respond to retail investors on these questions. Are there kind of structural, issues that you've dealt with to get to that point with your companies? How do you build for the next decade, build profitable, strong, innovative companies? Are there learnings that you can share? Maybe we could begin with Nandita, and then I think the both of you could also take that question.
I think at the core, as we believe in this opportunity that we all are talking about, which is a huge opportunity, white space, for all of us who've been around for 10 or 15 or close to 20 years also, I think the starting point is really building and strengthening the core, which then allows you to create reinforcing networks or moats, as you may call them, to be able to build for that core consumer, but also then find the opportunity to invest in new businesses and new opportunities that you see at scale which are available to you. So I think that in my mind is the biggest structural
biggest moat.
conversation that you need to have. I think build for scale is something that we have to do. We have to build innovatively. We have to really do the disruption and do the innovation and constantly look at what is the engine 2 of growth that's going to come about and keep making that investment ahead of time to be able to capture that opportunity as it
arrives.
fructifies. So I think that would be, from a structural perspective, I would say that's how it's wise to probably approach it structurally.
I think we're almost up with time, so that's a quick question for you, Abhiraj, if there are lessons that you want to pass on with how to become profitable.
I mean, I think the organization has to fundamentally have a DNA of frugality and value every dollar, and believe that profits are good and profits go hand in glove with growth. They're not at loggerheads with each other. Growth delivers more profits, and if you build the org structurally in a way that as you grow, the fixed costs don't grow linearly and you become more and more profitable, coupled with an organization that has got leanness and frugality in its ethos that values every rupee. That's how you do it.
So Arvind, finally with you, a decade of ride hailing, we haven't seen companies get profitable. You think you'll turn the tide?
Yeah, definitely. We are already an operational profitable company. I think for us, the math is simple, that we should grow revenue and reduce the cost by launching more products. And that's the extra thing on more of how can you become more profitable than just being break-even.
More products, self-disrupt, and stay ahead of the innovation curve. I think that's a message that's coming across. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.